All right, so when you're getting into doing high to low poly baking, you're going to run into a lot of issues. But one of the most problematic is going to be known as scalloping, right? So this little matte ball here, if we were to go look at the base of this thing, we're going to see that there's this little pattern here on the edge that kind of goes up and down, up and down. And this is scalloping, okay? There are ways to fix this, and the idea of fixing it is kind of simple, but in execution, it's a lot more complicated. And I've made this model a little bit messed up, so we have to do it the hard way. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go fix it in Blender real quick. But the main thing is that it is fixable by adding more geometry, more curvature to the cylinder, basically, right? Now, the problem with my model, though, when we look at it, is that the way I've modeled this, it's not a bunch of perfect quads. It would actually be easier to work with this if it was all quads, but we got this nice shape in here, and it all kind of falls apart, triangulated and nonsense like that. So generally speaking, if you can do anything in quads where you can do like simple loop cuts all over the place, you're going to have a much better time. And in our case, we're going to have to kind of be crafty about this, because when you work with geo like this, there's something that you need to know about normal map baking, is that the triangulation of the model is recorded, the low poly, right? And the high poly. It's like they're combined together into the normal map, basically. And so as a result, you get a bunch of tangents. And so if we had, the way I'm going to have to fix this, I'm going to have to subdivide these edges down here. But if I start doing something like subdividing this edge and I create an n-gon here, right? This n-gon will triangulate something like this. And this is going to look clearly obvious. It's going to cause problems, basically. Okay. If I was to leave an n-gon there on that side. So I don't want to do it there. If you have a chance to work on a completely flat surface, these are better places where we can do n-gons. Okay. And so the way this is going to work out is we're only going to work on this section and this section right here. Okay. I'm going to press Shift H and hide the rest of it. So now we can come in here and we could try something like loop cuts, perhaps, right? You don't always have a perfect cylinder. You might need to add loop cuts or something. And so it's better to model it with the higher amount of density to begin with. But if you didn't go that far, you can get the edge flow add-on. So if you add loop cuts, you can select the edges, set flow, and it'll try to figure out the curvature. That works pretty nice if you need to do that on something that's not perfectly cylindrical. Now, in our case, we can use loop tools, which is fantastic because we can just turn it back into a cylinder basically really fast. And so all we do is we select all of this here. We right click and we subdivide, and maybe once, maybe twice. So you can hit Shift R if you want to repeat twice, and that's it. We got all the edges we need here now to make this thing happen. So the trick, though, is we got to select all of these horizontal ones, and that way we can make it go ahead and work out here. So I'm going to press A, select. We're going to do loops, boundary loops, because this is a big n-gon. Well, it's connected to an n-gon. It doesn't select the loop. So we have to boundary loop select it. And now we can Alt-Shift click through here, select all of these, right click, use loop tools, and we can click circle. Right click and click circle, but that is apparently getting messed up. Maybe I have selected something wrong. We'll try this again real quick. I have not had problems with this until just now, apparently. So I'm going to circle these ones first. Maybe I was pressing the wrong one. I might have been pressing the wrong one. That happens sometimes, you know. Now I'm just going to select that outer one on top, circle that one. Maybe I was pressing, what was that, curve or something. Anyways, you get the idea. It's circled it out, right? And then that's what we want right there. It's nice and clean and smooth now. This area is not so much like that. But when we look at the model, you can see most of it baked just fine. Now, I believe the scalloping still technically takes effect in all these areas right here. It's just that we don't really see it because of the angles. Like, you might see it on like the back side or things like that. But if you can't really see it from like the most common vantage point, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. It's not that important. As long as it's not doing some like weird lighting stuff back there or something. But for the most part, this thing all baked appropriately the way I would expect it, except that bottom section. So when we did the subdivisions like that, it didn't destroy nothing. The UV maps are fine. It's just a higher density now. It works out into an n-gon on that flat surface, so we're good. We're golden on that. We can take this whole model now, the high and the low, and we'll go ahead and export it back out to Marmoset there. If I can get it to turn on. You got to make sure they're visible in the viewport to export them, by the way. And also, if you're just curious about some other baking tips real quick, the main thing is that your low poly models, you kind of want to do this setup here where it's like smooth by angles. You mark all of your edges that are sharp as seams. You have to do that. and then use weighted normals, face influence if you want, keep sharps, triangulate, keep normals, okay? And then triangulate it all. And then you can select all of this here, the high and the low. They just need to be kind of like one on top of each other, closely matching and intersecting. We can select them all. And now we can just export an FBX file. I'm going to use machine tools. All the machine tools add-on does really is just make sure it's the selected objects only. I'm going to replace my map ball FBX file. So when I go over to Marmoset, it will update now. And it might take just a second for it to export. Usually, like if your viewport frees up, then it's exported. Come back over here, you can see it was loading it. All right. If I click bake again real quick, that's going to redo this whole section here. We should see at the bottom now that this is maybe not perfect, but it's pretty good, right? Like you're not going to see major issues from it now. So, you know, that's good. That's what we want. Now we can just go back over here. I'm going to hide the high again. Go back to my low. I just got to go optimize this thing real quick and take care of all of it. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to Alt-H it. And I'm going to do kind of a little trick here. I'm going to just first Alt-Shift-click these. Just dissolve these ones first, right? And then I'm going to select these ones in between here. And I'm going to go around and just press C and use the cursor selector for this. Now, I could probably use like checker deselect and set it up somehow to do this. Maybe even using like mirror select to just get the other half real quick. But we're just going to manually go around and do it real quick. And so we have to put this back the way it was. You know, we could have duplicated the mesh and then added the extra detail so we didn't have to do this at all. I mean, there's always options available to you. And as you do more and more models, you'll find what works and what doesn't work for you, right? To me, just selecting around like this, a little bit annoying, but it's not too long, so it's not a big deal. And if you have to do it, you have to do it anyways. So we're just grabbing the ones we need, not the ones we don't, right? Like the ones we need that hold the shape together the way it was. The ones we added, we're selecting. Anyways, yeah, so you'll run into a lot of baking issues, and it's what's going to happen. You have to trial and error things a lot. It's definitely challenging when you're dealing with little things that, you know, baking's complicated. So it ends up being a problematic process. Select loops, select edge loops, and that'll go up to that next one. Since it doesn't go anywhere, it stops. Control X, that will just go ahead and dissolve everything like so, right? Our UV maps are intact. You can check this out here. They have not been, it's two objects. They have not been influenced by that at all for the most part. Maybe the tangents changed a little bit, or the triangulation changed a little bit, so the tangents of the normal map might look a little bit off or wrong, but because we crammed it into this little small area on a flat face, shouldn't be a big deal. And now we can go to the shading tab, grab our object here. We're just going to set up a new material. I'm going to grab this with the Node Wrangler add-on. After you grab that, you can hit Control-Shift-T. You can go ahead and load up that normal map right there. Load it in. It should be set up all correct. And we can add that material to this one as well. I want to make it metallic real quick. Go back to the layout here, go to Material Preview, turn my wireframes off. And now we can look at this over here, and we can see down here at the bottom, it looks fine, even after being baked at a higher resolution and then doing the reduction there. Not real noticeable, any kind of artifacting or anything crazy in there. And so that's what you're trying to do ultimately, is just get nice clean bakes. Unfortunately, it's always a little bit more lengthy and involved than you probably care for it to be, but that's just usually how it goes. This really comes down to like how you model things too. As you do it more and more, you'll realize what your low polys really need out of the normal maps. Like when you're doing like LOD levels too. Like, so game models generally have like a LOD 0. They can be a little bit denser, have some extra edges if needed, if it's okay within the triangle count. But generally speaking, like LOD level 1, as you get further away from the object, you start cutting out edges or faces. If you cut them out faster, like more heavily, as soon as possible, you might have, like, you'll save performance obviously in a game environment, but you won't usually lose a whole lot of the shape or the form or anything by doing that. So you can model your models a little bit denser than you think you could, and then LOD them out basically very quickly, cut them in half if you need to. And then as they get really small on the screen, like you can create artifact LOD models. Like they have all kinds of issues in them. As long as they don't pop in and out when they transition from LOD model to LOD model, it's not really a big deal. But so something like this is already about as low as I can go on this thing without starting to really, start working in this area rather hard and getting triangulation issues with the normal maps and all that, and just inaccuracies in the UVs, I guess. But ultimately, it's a challenge to do it. So take your time, practice on simple things. It's not going to hurt. Practice on cylinders, barrels, anything cylindrical. Eventually you'll run across this issue at some point. Sooner or later, it will give you a run for your money, but that's the solution. More geometry. And it's not too bad to deal with once you kind of understand how to deal with it, right? The flat edges really hurt, or excuse me, the flat faces really help. And but the uneven amount of edges really hurts when it comes to the cylindrical shape, right? So, asymmetrical objects present really unique challenges. You'll definitely want to start experimenting on those at some point, because you don't always get nice, perfect geo on everything, right? But if you have these big flat n-gons somewhere, usually they can be quite useful sometimes. You can still run into issues when you run into big flat n-gons. If you start changing the triangulation too much, perhaps, it definitely could cause an issue. But usually this is going to be a problem on curved surfaces, right? More organic type stuff. You'll definitely start getting possibly like tangent issues, right? From your normal maps as you try to increase and decrease resolutions and whatnot. That's where quads count. And hopefully this helps you in some way to understand the problem here. And just so you know, this is the kind of like recommended method for dealing with that, according to Marmoset, like in their introductory tutorials and all that. That's just where you'd find that piece of information. You'll notice here we also have like some light bleeding coming from like the backside a little bit. Unfortunately, there's one hard truth about baking, and that's like normally you can't get everything perfect, right? So, I mean, this is already relatively low poly. I mean, we're not going to get everything perfect 100% in every direction and every angle. So you try to get it the best you can from its most common viewed areas for the most part, and or to the best of your abilities, I guess. And then that's it. And you move on. You move on to your next object, because you got to, model more and more things. Whatever you might be doing, game projects or VFX or whatever you might be doing. VFX, of course, you probably just use a sub-D mesh. Don't do all this. So you get the idea. Anyways, if you like the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, all the fun stuff. And I'll check you out on the next one. All right. Take care.